Hey guys, welcome back to Sophisticakes by Mary. For this tutorial, I'm going to show you how I made this very colorful, easy Terrazzo Buttercream technique. Now I think it's called Terrazzo, it might be Terrazzo, I don't know. But I also added some chocolate shard toppers on this cake. This is a very simple technique, so stick around and I'll show you how I did it. Now we first have to put the cake together. So for this cake I used my chocolate cake recipe, and I used, instead of the crusting American buttercream for this technique, I actually used a Swiss meringue. Now the reason I used a Swiss meringue is because it doesn't crust, and I will show you why that worked to my advantage in a little bit. But for now, I am just crumb coating, filling and then crumb coating with that Swiss meringue. Now a crumb coat is just a thin coat of buttercream that locks in your crumbs. And you can see here the Swiss meringue is more bubbly, does have a lot more air in it than my American buttercream, and that's why I typically use the crusting American that I have that technique for, that I have in another tutorial that I will try to link here for you so you can see how I do it. But for this technique, that definitely would not have worked. And once you put that first crumb coat on, go ahead and pop it in your refrigerator for 20 minutes or your freezer for 10 minutes until it is firm to the touch. And once it has reached that point, you can go back in and do your final coat of buttercream. Now I'm just using my offset spatula to get the buttercream on and then scraping it with my plastic scraper. Now you could use a piping bag to pipe it on to try to eliminate some of those bubbles. I just chose not to this time. And what the piping bag does, as you're squeezing it through the piping bag, it can kind of push some of those air bubbles out. Honestly, I'm not sure why I didn't do it this time, but I didn't. And now I am removing that lip on the top of the cake and then cleaning off the board. Now to get the terrazzo technique, I am using some clay sculpting tools that have only been used for cake. And I have chilled this cake in the refrigerator for 20 minutes until it was firm to the touch again. And then I go back in and I am just carving out sections of that buttercream with these tools. That is the trick to it. And in these little pockets that I am carving out is where I will pipe the rest of the colored buttercream. So just go ahead and use different sizes and different shapes throughout the entire side of the cake there, and just do as many as looks visually appealing to your eye. I did end up going back and adding more once I had done my initial piping in of the buttercream and scraping off the excess, and you'll see that in a little bit here. But for now, I'm just going to let you see how I carved out these sections. I used this smaller tool to do some smaller dots because I kind of wanted a little bit of a speckled effect here and there also. And I'm just brushing off those extra little pieces and cleaning off the board. And if your cake starts to soften too much as you're working with it, go ahead and pop it back in the fridge. And these are the colors I chose. Since my shard toppers were going to be bright colors, I went ahead and tried to match the colors in the terrazzo itself. Now I just put it in the piping bag, cut a small hole in the tip, and then I'm just randomly going around and adding the color inside of those scooped out sections. Now if you want to do like certain sizes or certain shapes with one color and then do like a next smaller down size or shape in another color, you can do that too. I did it more random. Now you want to work a little bit quickly because when you get to this point where you have them all filled in and you're going to scrape off that extra buttercream, you want your base covering of buttercream to still be firm-ish. I mean, you're going to end up scraping some of that off, and that's okay. But since you piped those colors below the surface, basically, of your Swiss meringue, when you remove the excess on the outside of the cake, you're just going to be left with the color that you squirted into those crevices. And that actually is why I chose the Swiss meringue rather than the American buttercream, because when it crusts over, it's harder to remove the excess without kind of roughing up the surface of the buttercream that you had already applied. Now to make these toppers, I'm just using candy melts, my go-to. Just melt them in the microwave for about 30 second to a minute increments on 50% power until it has thoroughly melted through. Don't overheat it because it's kind of hard to get it back, and that's why I do the 50% power. Now go ahead and spread it on your silicone mat, or you could use parchment paper if you want to. Tap out those air bubbles, and I added some just white dragées on top. You don't have to do that. I think I was kind of going with the whole speckled look that I had on the cake with those little holes that I had done, and I just tried to kind of incorporate that on top with the white. I mean, I was okay with it, but I wonder if I actually might have liked it better without it. That's okay. And continue to do this through the rest of your chocolate or your candy melts, whichever one you choose to use. You could use chocolate if you want to, and then you would just use a food coloring that is meant for chocolate, and those would be your oil-based colors. And once it has firmed up, I just pop them in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes. Release them from your silicone mat or your parchment paper, and then I like to heat up my knife with a creme brulee torch to help to cut it so that you're not breaking it up into too many small little pieces. Kind of melts the chocolate on that cut line rather than breaking it. And just cut these up into just varying sizes and shapes, and make sure that you'll have more than you need, but you'll notice that when you're going to put the toppers on, you just kind of go with how it looks at the time. And I think you'd rather have some variety to choose from rather than being stuck with like 5 different pieces of chocolate that don't actually work well together, but it's all you have. So go ahead and make extra. And do the rest of your colors exactly the same way. Then I removed the cake from the refrigerator where I just stored it while I was doing the chocolate, and I am cutting little slits in the buttercream where I want the chocolate pieces to stick in. And since these are candy melts, they are not going to go soft on you like a chocolate would. So you can kind of manipulate them with your hands and move them around where you want them. They're a little bit firmer than a chocolate would be, but either one will work. And just kind of play with the placement of these chocolate shards. There is no specific way it needs to be done. This time I kind of left them more in the middle because I do a lot of offset decorations on my cakes, and this time I wanted to kind of leave it more in the middle since this is a different design than my typical abstract modern. Even though it is abstract modern, it's not a neutral color palette, it's a more bright color palette. And that's not what I typically do. And that's why I did this, because I thought it was going to be a fun change. And I thought I had this in my drafts on my computer for a while. And I thought, since New Year's is here this week, let's do something more colorful. So there it is, my Terrazzo inspired cake, done with Swiss Meringue buttercream and topped with some chocolate shards. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my video. And if you'd like to watch some other videos, go ahead and click on the link to one of these other videos shown here. And if you would like to check out my other social media, I am on Facebook and Instagram under the same name, Sophisticakes by Mary. And please take the time to share, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when I upload another video. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next tutorial.